Welcome to CrossTalk. My name is Kevin Tocci, and I will be your host for the next 30 minutes. Now, this particular program that you are about to view is one of four that we have done in order to help inform you of the candidates that are going to be on the May 18th Whitman annual town election ballot. I remember the polls open at Whitman Town Hall at 9 a.m., close at 5 p.m. So it's up to you to get out and help decide the future of your community. And there are four candidates seeking two spots on that ballot. One of those individuals seeking one of those spots joined us today, Mr. Justin Evans. Justin.
Hey, Kevin, thanks for having me.
Welcome to the show. We know that you are a member of the Whitman Finance Committee.
Yep.
Now you're looking to be on the Board of Selectmen. What drives you to want to be an elected member of this Board of Selectmen?
So it's I've loved being on the Finance Committee. You get to do a lot with a bunch of volunteers. You know, we don't get paid. We put in a lot of hours, but you get to the point every year where the goal of the Finance Committee is to put a balanced budget on the floor for town meeting for everyone to vote on, and there's a lot less long-term planning, a lot less strategic planning, and that is what I think is the big issue in town right now, is planning for the future. So seeing that shortfall in an appointed position, I decided to put myself forward, run for an elected seat where I can do a lot more policy, long-term planning, that kind of thing.
So other than being a member of the FinCom, have you served on any other boards or committees? And also, if you want to extend it to volunteer work for other organizations?
So I've been involved in the town for a while. Since I moved back to town, I joined the Whitman think tank, which you've had on your show.
Well, actually, it's
its own show, yeah. And I've served on the Budget and Policy Subcommittee with two of the other selectmen that are running for re-election right now. But way back in high school, I was part of the fundraising team that bought all of the equipment for a skate park that still stands piled behind the police station. So it was I graduated, left, and thought nothing of it again, and then moved home and saw a pile of ramps sitting there. So
oddly enough, wasn't it? It was during that time, if I'm correct. Was it like skateboarding illegal in Whitman?
It on the sidewalks. It was. That was part of the drive to build a skate park.
Yeah, because there was like I think there was an article, and there was like the individual who was apprehended for riding their skateboard, and then there was the whole movement to build it. And it was supposed to be built at one time over where the police station is behind it, right?
Behind it, yeah. Where the equipment is still sitting kind of scattered around.
Maybe there could be something that you can help mobilize and get up and running if you get elected.
That would be nice. I actually hadn't thought about that until I went to visit with the chief of police probably a year ago. I'm the liaison on the Finance Committee for the police department. And as I pulled into the parking lot, I looked back there and thought, oh yeah, that was something I did 10 years ago.
Fantastic. Tell me, what do you think the role of a selectman is? What's your understanding of that role?
Technically, the role of the selectman, it's the executive body for the town of Whitman, where town meeting would be the legislative body. But I think a lot of what it boils down to is that the selectmen are elected to represent what the citizens of Whitman want, basically the direction they want the town to go. So a lot of it is listening to people, planning for the future, really, being less reactive than you might get at a town meeting. These are the people with the long-term vision to drive it forward.
Okay. You've been out and about, engaging with the residents. What are they saying? What are they feeling that are some of the needs for this community?
So knocking on doors, I've been out for a little over 2 months now, just trying to meet as many people as possible. I think I eclipsed 2,000 doors last week. And you hear a lot of the same thing from people. The biggest complaint in town right now is the roads. Just as you walk up to their house, they point at a pothole and say, "Fix that, I'll vote for you." But a lot of people they're concerned about the budget, they're concerned about the schools, but the concerns are all over the place. It's, we need to reduce spending, we need to push for an override, we need to spend less on the schools or more. So sorting through the noise is really the difficult part right now.
I've seen my share of races, not only in this community, but other communities. This particular race seems that it's up a tick in regards to how contentious it is. And I get there's a lot of passion from all the candidates. Is it just me that there's contention with this race, or is it obvious?
Well, I've never run for office before, so I don't know what a typical race is like, but I do know that even on the forum the other night, it was striking to see 4 candidates so involved in the town that they had answers ready for every single question. They all had plans. I think that kicks it up a notch, but also I think that just the modern type of campaigning, where so active on social media, everything's amplified right now. People have their passionate views about politics all over the place, and that boils down to us here in Whitman.
Okay. You've kind of alluded to it. There is a financial crisis here in Whitman. There's initially, last year, there was a conversation that something needed to be done for fiscal 2020. Here we sit just a few weeks out from town meeting and town election. How did we get here?
It's a long story. So going back to when Whitman-Hanson decided to regionalize, the state incentivized the school districts to do that. And so you saw a bunch of more regional school districts popping up. And in the 2010 ed reform, mini ed reform, they're still saying that there hasn't been one since 92, 93, 93.
Yep. The ed reform of 1993.
But they did tweak the formula in 2010 to sort of disincentivize regional schools, or to reprioritize other districts. And so now Whitman has been receiving a large chunk of state aid, but we're above the foundation budget where the schools need to be, where the state will give you more money, but below where they would like us to be. So we're in that hold harmless place where every increase on the school budget just gets passed to the towns without the 50% right now that the state's paying for. And that trickles into other departments. Everyone's feeling the pain there.
What's it like as a member of the Finance Committee? You get a chance to meet with these individuals. You've been a part of, over the past couple of months, joint meetings with the Board of Selectmen and hearing people yelling and screaming at each other because they're frustrated with how things are and, well, they don't want their department. How do you feel about that as a FinCom member? But then if you're a member of the Board of Selectmen, it probably takes on a different connotation.
It does. So, I mean, my first impressions when I joined the Finance Committee in 2017 was that, for an appointed official who didn't really have to show much credentials, I just had to reach out to Mike Seeley. They gave me a lot of power. It was really shocking. And then you listen to the department heads, kind of sort through what they need, what everybody wants. And over the course of this year in particular, we reached out to every department head back in October or November. We started the process really early, asking what it would take to create a level service budget. And our $2 million roughly in the hole that we've been reducing from that level service line. And that's created a lot of tension in not just Finance Committee meetings and Board of Selectmen's meetings, but it's carrying over into the school committee meetings as well.
There's been, in one of those last joint meetings, there was a conversation. I believe there was a vote by the Board of Selectmen for the town to go in the direction of doing a debt exclusion. That debt exclusion, of course, would alleviate a bond that is in the levy limit. It would actually take out the projects that were building the new police station, renovating the fire station, and town hall. So instead of paying free cash, in order to pay that down, it would become its own debt exclusion that the residents would pay off until it was no longer. But there's also a conversation that the Finance Committee members felt that maybe a Prop 2.5 override would be the best way to interject funding into the operating budget. Give me, if you will, I'm sure you had a chance to kind of look at this over and over and over. What is it about this versus type of thing? Because I know there was a conversation about trying to do both. It's like, that won't work. If you will, help the folks who are watching at home get an understanding as to how you understand what might be the better for the community.
So it's a really good question and an important thing to focus on. For debt exclusions where, typically large capital projects are funded through debt exclusions, where it's not something that, is a typical operating expense. You're building a new police station.
Right.
And back during 2010 when they passed this, decided to fund it within the levy limit. It was a point of debate. They actually had planned on including a DPW, a new Council on Aging, as part of a large capital project, all passed as a debt exclusion. And when the Board of Selectmen no longer supported a debt exclusion, we ended up with this limited, we'll build a new police station and renovate the town hall and fire station and fund it all within the levy limit. And that worked for a while, but we're getting to the point where it's hurting the rest of the budget. So that's more of a best practice question. For operational override, the appropriate time to pass one of those would be when your operating expenses are growing. And so if you look at the rest of the town budgets, we've got to the point where there's nowhere left to cut. We're looking at potentially laying off school employees this year, reducing overtime that amounts to basically police and fire staff because we chose to fund things with overtime instead of hiring more police officers and firefighters. So when you get down to those kind of cuts is when you want to start looking at a Prop 2.5 override, when it's your operational budget that's growing and not necessarily long-term capital projects.
What's interesting, both of those ideas, a debt exclusion, of course, folks I think to this day still don't understand the difference between the two. Debt exclusion, yes, it does raise your taxes, but there's, you put it on the books for say it could be 10 years, 20 years, but once that debt's paid, well, that burden on the tax on the resident goes away as well. Prop 2.5 override, well, that's forever, unless for some strange reason it's never been done, an underride is passed, and that doesn't happen either. So it's one of those things that it's doubled up on, and it's something that's part of your budget moving forward. I saw a report recently about the top 100 communities where what the tax rate was. And it was interesting seeing there were surrounding communities that were in the top 100 where their tax rate was substantial.
Yeah.
I think Abington was like number 100, just for an example. But Whitman was not. Give me your thoughts in regards to, the tax rate isn't all that bad here in the community, but yet the town is suffering in regards to a lack of revenue. How do you sell that to the residents in regards to, we need to be able to fund these budgets and we need to take more out of your pocket?
It's a really tough sell to convince people that the community that they're living in, it's no longer sustainable, and ultimately it's going to cost them more to keep funding at this level. It's hard to get people to pay more for something when they're not going to see anything more in return just to continue level service. But I know that looking at surrounding communities, I think the Brockton Enterprise ran an article back in January that found that in the immediate surrounding area, to get a lower per person tax rate or per household tax rate, you had to move to either Brockton or Taunton, and that was your only two options. Everything else in the community has a higher tax rate per single family home.
Yeah. What's interesting you say that, because you're talking urban, suburban.
Right.
And you're also talking about a split tax rate, because Brockton, unlike Whitman, where it's a single tax rate, Brockton, I believe it may be like $16 or $17 per thousand for residential, but if you own a business, it's like $31.
Right.
So it's different.
It is different, and that's why you would expect Brockton and Taunton to have lower tax rates than Whitman. The surprising thing is that Whitman was below places like Rockland and Weymouth, which do have large commercial stuff going on.
Right. Well, in your opinion, is there a right course of action for this town to be able to put together a long-term financial plan?
There is. That's been really a focus of the Finance Committee for the last year, but we began it 2 years ago. And it's, to get to that point, you have to consider everything. So the schools actually have done a very good job of what their long-term capital expenses are going to be. And that's why they're able to present us with, 5 years out, we got to look at a middle school kind of things.
Right.
But the other departments, we don't really have a long-term capital plan and process. We don't really have a long-term, what is this department going to cost in a couple years built in. It's the kind of thing that I'd like to see us just know what it's going to cost us in a few years, so we know that, if we push for an override, it's going to last more than 2 or 3 years.
It's interesting you mention that, because I know that's been mentioned multiple times that the town should take a look at either a strategic or a capital plan. it would be the best practice, it might save the town money, and it also builds somewhat of a consensus with the community. Are you on board with such a theory?
I am. Most of the arguments against doing that are just that we don't have a lot of capital to spend, so why have a plan? But you should have the plan anyway to justify raising new capital. I mean, you got to put the cart before the horse, or the horse before the cart. Yeah.
Okay. How important is the current town administrator to helping resolve this current financial crunch that the town's in?
I mean, no one has been through more with the town of Whitman than Frank right now. He's been the town administrator since 2001, has been involved in the town for a decade or so before that. If you need to get anything done right now in Whitman, you have to go to the town administrator. Everything will run through him, and I mean, driving the budget process, he has just instinctively, with all the experience he has, he knows how to push it forward. So it's been very useful with that, working with him.
What's interesting here is my follow-up question is, if you are fortunate to be elected come May 18th, you could very well be one of the 5 individuals who you'll be given the task of finding a successor to Mr. Lynham, who could well retire in the next 3 years. Your police chief has already said that he is going to be calling it a career with the Whitman Police Department, and who knows what other department heads might decide to call it a career as well. What do you feel is a good way to fill those positions? Do you have a thought process as to what you'd like to see the town go for in regards to seeking out a new town administrator or a department head of the magnitude of a police chief?
It's a good question. I think this is probably one of the most important jobs of a selectman, is deciding who is going to manage the largest departments day to day, whether it's general government, police, fire, that kind of thing. And looking forward, we just need to find, for a town administrator, for example, someone who agrees with the forward-looking direction that I'd like to see it go. So just somebody who buys into the process that we need to be planning for the future and not reacting on either at town meeting or pulling money out of stabilization to balance the line at the last minute. Just somebody who understands best practices and pushes forward.
What's interesting, and you actually mentioned in regards to Frank's longevity, it's rare that a town administrator, especially here on the South Shore, has a shelf life longer than 3 to 5 years, because it depends on the dynamic of the Board of Selectmen. It depends on the voters. Yeah. It depends on the individual being able to, take care of tasks so 3 to 5 years is the way it goes.
Yeah.
So Frank being around as long as he has been is, again, it's rare. So it's interesting to kind of get your take on it and get the other candidates' take on it as well. Earlier in our conversation, you actually mentioned about back in 2009, 2010, there was a conversation about not only a police station, but also doing something with the DPW and the senior center. There have been a couple of attempts to try to do something to build a new DPW center, whether it was to build a completely new facility, maybe just a part of a facility. There was even a conversation of buying a property up on Route 18 and making that a DPW building. Give me your thoughts. Do you feel that a DPW building is still a top priority, or is there another capital project out there that surpasses this?
I mean, at least immediately, the DPW is still our top capital need in town. But it's also one of the things that most residents don't think about from day to day. They know the DPW when they go drop off their leaves and when they fix the potholes or plow the snow, and that's their only interaction with it. But right before I announced that I was going to run for selectman, when I was kind of feeling it out, considering it, I stopped by the existing facility just to see the kind of shape that it was in. And it was worse than I had ever imagined. Offices with just, a hole punched in a wall to push an AC through. Just the garage doesn't close right, and we're keeping hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of equipment in there. It was rough to see, and it really reinforced that And really, they don't have a shower in there. Some of these guys are working down in the sewers, cleaning stuff up, and they have to go home and wash it off. It's gross.
You're talking about a building that probably isn't up to code any longer.
Probably not, and we're looking at the state's the state's requiring us to follow OSHA standards coming soon. That's going to be an issue with that building. It's really I don't know that it has the right eye wash stations or things that we need to fix.
I had somebody make a suggestion, and I thought it'd be something to share with you in regards to this issue with a DPW facility. If you look at a regionalization, Whitman has done it via its schools with Hanson. We have a shared veterans agent, shared building. He's not a building instructor. Is he a building inspector? What is Bob covered?
Facilities manager, yeah.
Facilities manager. And your animal control officer is shared. Why not a DPW facility? Why not a shared facility that maybe Hanson is in need, maybe Abington? Is that something that's worthy of exploring as an option?
It's definitely worth exploring. It would be difficult because of the way we run the water sewer. That runs as an enterprise on its own. I don't know that you could merge that in with any other towns. Mm-hmm. But for the central DPW, I think it's definitely worth looking into, whether Abington or Hanson, something in the area that maybe could use the help of our DPW.
Okay. One of the issues that the town is facing is a lack of revenue, being able to generate revenue. Is there enough commercial and industrial space in this community to be able to lure the right industry in to help the tax rolls?
So this is actually something that to get really into the weeds with you, this is something I've been thinking about a lot. The state allows us to look at what they call smart growth zoning, which is 40R zoning, not to be confused with 40B. But in and around the train station and within, I believe, a half mile, we are allowed to put sort of an overlay zoning type thing. So we could attract more areas like the Bostonian condos or more dense development in and around the train station. It's kind of a weird thing that Whitman has, a booming town center and then a mile stretch and then the train. I think it would make a lot of sense to try and extend either of those out a little bit in either direction.
Is there any other communities here in the South Shore that are experimenting with smart growth and 40R that you know of?
There are. There's actually a lot of them in the area that they're experimenting with it. The most notable ones would be Kingston and Plymouth, and they're each putting in a couple hundred units. Mm-hmm. I think Easton is putting in like 20 units. So somewhere in that mix is probably where we want to target.
I was going to say Rockland, but I don't want to add any more. But you're right. Kingston and Plymouth are two that are also very notable.
Brockton
as
too
well. Is working on it, right, as they're building out their downtown at this particular moment. The drug and opioid epidemic. Now, we know that there's been numbers as of late that we've seen a little bit of a decline in Plymouth County when it comes to opioid-related overdose deaths.
Yep.
How is an issue like this, how is the board, being a member of the Board of Selectmen, how is that an issue or somehow related to being on that board? How does that affect you as a member if you are elected?
It affects where you want to direct more resources. So our police department's done a great job in having a needle drop off. I've seen out knocking on doors, within 50 feet of me, a police car pull over, pick up a needle, put it in a disposal bin, and pull away. So it is still going on, and it's still happening in Whitman. But serving on the Board of Selectmen, we've got a couple of groups in town between here and Brockton called Whitman Counseling and Whitman Will, and we do dedicate some funding to them each year. Last year on the Finance Committee, we actually voted to split that funding. It had all previously been to Whitman Counseling, and we decided to split that in half and direct more to Whitman Will. This year, we decided to, when looking at where to cut, it's difficult to cut basically our charitable contributions. And I know we held Whitman Will harmless with the same amount of funding we gave them last year. I don't remember Whitman Counseling.
Okay. I'm going to ask you a selfish question, if you don't mind.
Sure.
Talk to me about the importance of a local access center like WHCA and its importance, if you will?
I think that something like this is very important. It's giving me a chance to talk directly to the community as I'm out here campaigning. I think your reach is probably greater than my, how many doors that I can knock on in the next 3 weeks. So something like this, just to stay on top of local issues. I don't know that, bringing a reporter in from the Enterprise would cover nearly in depth what you've been able to take care of here.
What are you doing in regards to getting your word out other than lawn signs? Do you have social media? Do you have a website? What do you have?
So I'm trying to run as modern of a campaign as I possibly can. I've got a website, votejustinevans.com. I've got a public Gmail, votejustinevans@gmail.com. I'm on Facebook. I'm frequenting the various Whitman Facebook groups. I've got an Instagram and Twitter handles, both at votejustinevans. I'm out there just trying to reach in as many different methods of communication as possible.
If there was something that you wanted to say to the residents, and I want to at least take a moment to let the residents know or remind residents that your annual town election is coming up on May 18th. It's a Saturday. The polls open at 9 a.m., close at 5 p.m. It's up to you to get out there and make a difference. If you wanted to give them a message right now, what would that message be?
I would say that this is the only contested election right now on the ballot. So do your research, look into each of the selectmen, and I've presented between my website, my social media, I've presented kind of a vision of the future of where I'd like to see Whitman go. I would welcome your support on May 18th, and I think together we can help see Whitman succeed. And actually, just to add to what you said, I believe that absentee voting is now open. And you can just drop by the town hall and absentee vote in person anytime between now and Election Day.
Very good. Well, I want to thank you very much for joining me, and I want to thank you for tuning in. And again, it's important for you to get educated, understand where the candidates stand on issues as they're counting on you to get out there on May 18th. It's a Saturday, again, rain or shine, polls are open, cast your ballot between 9 a.m. and 5 p.m. and help guide the future of your community. Well, until next time, have a good day.